You know what they say, oh, those celebrities, sure they're rich and famous, living in the lap of luxury, but still they're just like you and me. They walk their dogs, they go to Starbucks, they sit ringside at cage fights, and cheer wildly as someone tears every ligament in their knee because they took too long to tap to a vicious knee bar. You know, everyday stuff. And while tweeting about and showing up to a card these days is pretty passé and almost expected if your target demo has a large cross-section with the UFC's, today we want to focus on the famous folks that made us do a double take when the production team cut to them at a show. The ones that made us go, wait a second, what? They're here? They're a fan? And as it turns out, every one of these entries has an interesting tale related to their fandom and or involvement. So let's grab our autograph books and get those selfie cameras ready because I'm Tommy from MMA On Point, and these are 10 incredibly famous people you never thought you'd see at fights. Number 10, Jim Brown. Who better to start with than the original celebrity UFC cameo? From our modern perspective on Jim Brown, who most people either know as a legendary NFL football player or as that guy who was in Mars Attacks, his presence at UFC 1 as part of the commentary team is absolutely baffling. Truly, what in the hell is this guy doing here? How did this even happen? Well, as it turns out, Brown being a part of the broadcast was one of the biggest gets they had at the first UFC. It was a major win that Jim was there, and so now it's time to provide that oh so important context. Brown retired from football young in 1965 and immediately began getting major acting roles. He was also great friends with Muhammad Ali, who he even proposed a boxing match with after he left the NFL, only for Ali to hilariously demonstrate to him that he had no chance right then and there. And while he smartly nixed the boxing idea, he would be ringside commentator for the Rumble in the Jungle, and then go on to be a part of the NFL on CBS broadcast team in the late 70s. Some of his biggest roles in film came in the years leading up to UFC 1, so given his relationship to Ali and his commentary background, as well as his notoriety at the time, being able to score Jim Brown for that initial broadcast was one of the things that helped legitimize the event, believe it or not. And I have to say, given that he was watching something so new and out there, he did a pretty good job. Number 9, Halle Berry. As a massive Invicta FC fan, I've naturally seen every one of their events, and I remember wondering why on earth is Halle Berry in Kansas City for Invicta FC 37? That sentence alone is one of the most random things I've ever said. She would later start popping up at UFC events, and then the picture became clear as the actor turned first-time director had decided to take on a movie about a down-on-her-luck MMA fighter called Bruised. Berry would star in the lead role as well, and over the course of its production became incredibly familiar with the sport, training regularly with top pros and working with Invicta and the UFC on the project, both of which are featured in the movie. It definitely sounds like she took the role seriously and looked to be in fight shape during filming. There's a documentary on Fight Pass all about the creation of the movie that goes pretty in-depth into what she really went through. The film was a Netflix release and didn't garner a ton of buzz or high praise in reviews despite the effort though. The movie would also create a legal battle between Berry and Kat Zingano, who was cut from the film after being released by the UFC. That matter is still ongoing. Number 8, Kevin James. Now yes, James is one of the more well-known celebrities to regularly attend MMA events, but still, the first time you saw him, the sitcom star's fandom is incredibly random nonetheless, especially when you consider how far he took it, which is why he landed on this list, because Kevin is way beyond just showing up with his celebrity buddies on fight night. The guy has taken it about as far as any famous person has in terms of involvement. While the comedian has been a staple of crowd shots since the early 2000s, James brought Rampage Jackson, Randy Couture, Dan Henderson, and Frank Trigg on his massively popular network television sitcom King of Queens for a bar fight sequence back in 2006 when there was no way the majority of his audience had any clue who those guys were. Then of course there was Here Comes the Boom, one of the rare films that is about MMA, and it's okay. I don't dislike it, it's not bad. You can tell he's a massive fan and that he wanted to do the sport justice in the movie, which is more than I can say for most films about fighting. Oh, also, he cornered Jason Miller when he fought Michael Bisping. Yeah, see, that's him. He's actually there. Beat that, other celebs. Number 7, Gordon Ramsay. Watching world-renowned chef and television personality Gordon Ramsay yell at people is a blast. Fuck off! Yes, chef. He just has a way with cursing that I personally admire greatly as a connoisseur of four-letter words, and the best version of a Ramsay tirade usually comes on the ultra-popular Hell's Kitchen.
Fucking boss is fucking raw!
There's an infamous clip from the show where a contestant was done with Gordon's beratings, so he got in Ramsay's face to challenge him to throw down. Gordon's responses were hilarious because every bit of the tone was, I wish a motherfucker would.
Fuck all y'all. You heard it?
Watch the step.
As it turns out, the internet's favorite chef is a karate black belt and has been training in mixed martial arts for the last decade. Given that context, and the fact that one of his restaurants, the one they film Hell's Kitchen in, is located in Las Vegas, as is the UFC and his good buddy Dana White, it makes sense that we regularly see the super chef showing up at cards, as well as commenting on fights on social media. But if you didn't know any better, he's definitely an oddball choice for the front row of a cage fight. Number 6. CARMEN ELECTRA. This is, I think, my favorite entry on the list, and not just for the obvious reasons. CARMEN ELECTRA, probably best known for, honestly, just being CARMEN ELECTRA, would for a very brief time period, as in like the span of 2 events in 2001, act as a brand ambassador for the new Zuffa UFC. The promotion, of course, was looking to attract a younger male demo, and given that Elektra was a pretty well-known figure with that audience at the time, it made a ton of sense. In addition to doing a really cheese-tacular photo shoot with some of the roster, CARMEN did the media rounds to promote the events, and would attend UFC 32 and 33. She would be brought out in front of the audience formally at the former show, and called the energy in the building off the hook, which I wish was a phrase people still said today. Why this entry is my favorite is because of her appearance at the next card. Elektra was given a brief cage-side interview and had a 20-year fan's perspective on the sport.
These guys are true athletes. They study many forms of martial arts, and you can obviously see that in the ring.
That is a hell of a take for 2001, when most people still saw MMA as straight-up trash. Bring regular CARMEN ELECTRA cage-side interviews back, you cowards. Number 5. George Clooney. As Corey Anderson once perfectly explained, there's levels to this, and celebrity is no different.
They wear masks and capes.
Sure, you can be notable, maybe even considered famous, but there are very few actual stars out there, and the biggest ones aren't exactly flocking to cage fights even still today, but especially in 2004. This is pre-tough, okay? So if you're in then...
I hate reality shows, and I've never even watched one. I just never got the whole concept, but they're popular.
You're an OG celeb. Get out of here, Chris Pratt, Matt Damon, Vin Diesel. You guys are casuals.
I was the actor Vin Diesel until I got bitten by a radioactive Osama bin Laden.
For some context, UFC 47 was a huge event for the promotion and only did 300K buys. So keep that in mind, because throughout the night there were your classic B-listers popping up. Michael Clark Duncan, Carson Daly, Juliette Lewis, fucking Joey Pants. None of these people even come remotely close to George Clooney. Yes, megastar George Clooney was sitting right next to Lorenzo Fertitta, waiting to watch Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz finally throw down. To give you some context on George at that point too, this isn't fucking Facts of Life Clooney, this isn't Roseanne Clooney, this is after the motherfucker was Batman. He was already Danny Ocean. He was ER. He was Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? If he showed up to a card today, he'd still be one of the biggest stars that's ever come to one of these shows, let alone in 2004. That would be like Tom Hanks showing up to UFC 1. Seriously, big ups to Clune Dog, respect. Number 4, Paris Hilton. You know how sometimes during the broadcast, the UFC will pop up some tweet from a celebrity that's discussing the fights, and a lot of times it's super generic, like a publicist wrote it, like it was part of some cross-promotional deal. I mean, after all, the UFC is owned by one of the biggest agents in Hollywood, and looking at socialite, reality TV star, and Hilton Hotel heiress Paris Hilton's tweets in the last few years, you might think to lump her in with that ilk. But you would be wrong, because if you dive a bit deeper, you'll see that Paris is OG MMA Twitter, having fight tweets that go back as far as UFC 101 in 2009, the year she joined the platform, and it's got 13 likes. She is one of us, you guys, minus the unimaginable wealth. Hilton has been seen regularly at cards as far back as UFC 57 in early 2006, and at an after party for the event, apparently nearly got into it with, prepare yourself to try and remember this name, Willa Ford, who according to reports had Chuck Liddell tell security that if Paris gets into it with Ford and security puts their hands on Willa, a bunch of UFC fighters are going to stomp their shit in. I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, good times. The tough boom wasn't just a fad for Hilton though, as it appears she's kept up with the promotion over the last 15 some odd years. She's even had some training from UFC vet Gabe Rudiger.
We had 2-hour sessions set, and both times I think she left within 40 minutes. I think once she left at 30.
Number 3, Mandy Moore. Is there anything in the world more wholesome than Mandy Moore? Seriously, it's like kittens, puppies, newborns, and then Moore is a close fourth. The singer/actor isn't exactly the type you'd expect to show up at a cage fight, but you would be oh so wrong. And Moore wasn't just in one of those scenarios where a celeb is out promoting some new project, so they go to be seen in public and head to an event. Those things are always super obvious. No, Moore is an MMA hardcore and has been one since the mid-2000s, even telling CNN once,
"The UFC is the only sport I'm really into. I'm the quintessential girl on the other side of things. I don't really go to football games or basketball games. It's only UFC," which is kind of bizarre, but I love it.
I wouldn't even be shocked if she had a paid membership to the underground. There were even rumors for a time before her first marriage that she and GSP were an item, although St. Pierre has since squashed those. Mandy, I'm so sorry, you almost had the best. Moore has appeared at a bunch of UFC events, has worked with the promotion in several different capacities over the years, and in perhaps her greatest bit of fandom, had Chuck Liddell in one of her music videos so she could put him in a gi and kick him in the balls. Also hilariously, in 2012, the Culinary Union attacked Moore's character for her association with the UFC. I think that sentence just gave me a stroke. Number 2, Donald Trump. I know I've said this before, but I cannot emphasize enough how insane it is that a sitting president of the United States attended a cage fight. There have only been 46 of them, 5 since the UFC began, and I'm gonna go ahead and tell you right now, there could be 4,600 more US presidents, and there's only ever going to be one that came to an MMA event while still in office, no less, and that's Donald Trump. As a historical footnote to anybody that doesn't have the first clue about the MMA business, this connection seems inexplicable, but in context, of course, Trump came to a UFC card. His relationship to the promotion goes way back to when Zuffa first bought the company, holding their second card at Trump Taj Mahal in Atlantic City, thus beginning a friendship between Dana and Donald that would stand the test of time. Trump's dipped his toes into all sorts of sports and entertainment, football, pro wrestling, boxing, and of course the ill-fated Affliction promotion. So given all those connections and the fact that White stumped for the future president at the RNC prior to his election, it makes sense that he would come to a card, and he did. UFC 244.
Congratulations to Dana White, UFC.
He's not the only world leader interested in cage fighting, though. Putin has gone to Fedor fights, and of course, Chechen warlord Hamzan Kadyrov loves him some MMA. I want to give a real quick honorable mention to Zac Efron, not because of the era in which he's been showing up to cards, but the fact he randomly went to Fight Night Font versus Vera at the Apex. Going to that card live shows true fandom. Alright, and here we go, our top spot. Number 1, Mark Zuckerberg. Yes, of course, how could we make a list of surprising famous folks coming to fights without talking about this mother Zucker? And the context through which he did makes him easily number 1. Yes, Facebook creator Jesse Eisenberg, who's recently taken to training UFC.
So it's like, all right, what's a thing that is both like just super engaging physically, but also intellectually? I think to some degree, it's like MMA is like the perfect thing, because it's like if you don't, like you stop paying attention for 1 second, you're gonna end up on the bottom.
Showed up cage side at Fight Night 211 last weekend, and man oh man did he do so in a way that brought him way more heat than had he just shown up in the VIP area. There were whispers of the 22nd richest human being alive coming to a card all week that went full megaphone after Mackenzie Dern claimed Zuckerberg had rented out the entire event.
I mean, I know Mark Zuckerberg like rented out the whole event, you know, so I know he'll be there.
Prompting Dana White to hop onto Twitter to call the claim total bullshit, with most assuming he meant that Mr. Facebook wouldn't be there, which didn't turn out to be the case. Insert the don't believe his lies meme, am I right?
I've been in this since I was 19 years old. I know the mentality of a fighter that wants to fight. I wholeheartedly believe you will never see George St. Pierre in the octagon again unless he's cornering somebody. Anyway, on a positive note, George St. Pierre is back.
Was it total bullshit that he rented it? Apparently so, as in an IG post, Mark thanked DFW for inviting him to the show. So either Zuck's lying, or they just didn't want him bothered by common folk, IDK man, rich people. Whatever the case actually was, they did bar everybody but the small team that came from Meta to the show, and while it's still not entirely clear why they came besides just having a good time, lots of folks weren't exactly thrilled about it, not to mention the optics of a billionaire getting his own private blood sport show felt a bit Running Man.
I'd buy that for $1.
Speaking of Arnold Schwarzenegger, our editor Luke Taylor is also an American action movie legend and did a fantastic job turning this video around in such a timely manner. So be sure to show him some love on his socials, and give Ben Rosette a follow while you're at it for providing us with endless jams. Liking and subscribing would really help us out here too, and provide you with more content in the future. Who is the most unexpected celeb you've spotted at a card? Please share with everybody around the campfire we call the comments. And as always, thank you for taking the time to let me entertain you. Keep on trucking.